At the family gathering, Mom said, "She doesn't belong at this table." Her voice sliced through the laughter like broken glass. Forks clattered against plates, conversation froze midair, and every eye at that long mahogany dining table swung toward me. My throat burned, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. My mother, Linda, smirked like she'd just executed the perfect blow. "Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation. Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin." My sister Haley hid her grin behind a champagne glass, and my father shifted uncomfortably but said nothing, like always. I gripped the edge of the chair so tightly my knuckles went white. "Then maybe I shouldn't be here," I said evenly, forcing my voice not to crack. I pushed my chair back slowly, the scrape echoing in the room, heavier than thunder. No one stopped me. Not one person said a word. The silence was louder than any insult. I walked out. Each step felt like it weighed 100 pounds, but I kept my head high. Behind me, the dining room erupted again with laughter, whispers, and clinking glasses, as if my existence could be erased in seconds. But what they didn't notice was the one person who didn't laugh. My grandfather, Henry Donovan, his sharp, blue eyes following me as I disappeared down the hallway. He was the oldest at that table but carried himself like a man still in command of every room he entered. 5 minutes later, I heard the shuffle of his cane behind me on the stone path. Outside. "Emily." His voice was low but steady. "Don't let them see you cry." I turned, biting my lip, but the tears betrayed me anyway. "Grandpa, she humiliated me in front of everyone. My own mother." He stepped closer, putting a hand on my shoulder, his grip surprisingly firm. "Do you think I don't know what she's doing? Do you think I haven't watched the way she and your sister have tried to push you out?" I froze. "You noticed?" His jaw tightened. "I notice everything. And tonight, they've made a mistake they won't come back from." His eyes glinted with something dark, something dangerous. "Now wipe your face. Let me handle this." Before I could respond, he turned and walked back into the dining room alone. The door shut behind him with a final thud, leaving me trembling. On the porch. The next sound I heard wasn't laughter. It was silence. Thick, suffocating, stunned silence. And when I dared to peek back through the window, every single face at that table had fallen pale, eyes wide, as my grandfather stood at the head of the table saying words I couldn't hear. But whatever he said, it changed everything. The silence inside that dining room was almost suffocating, the kind that presses against your chest until it's hard to breathe. And even though I was outside on the porch, I felt it through the walls, the weight of a truth dropped like a stone into a calm lake, sending ripples across every smug face that just moments ago had been laughing at me. My grandfather, Henry, stood at the head of the table with his cane pressed against the floor, his voice steady but sharp as steel, cutting through the still air. "Shame on all of you," he began, his eyes sweeping across the table, pinning each of them where they sat, and no one dared to move. My mother's smirk faltered, my sister's champagne glass trembled slightly in her hand, and my father shifted uncomfortably, caught between the loyalty he had never given me and the power of his father's words. "Do you even understand what you've just done? You humiliated my granddaughter in front of this family, and for what? To stroke your own egos? To pretend she is less than you?" His cane slammed once against the wood floor, the sound reverberating, making even the youngest cousins jump. "Let me tell you something none of you seem to know, or perhaps you conveniently forgot. Emily is the only one in this family who stood by me when I was in the hospital last year. She was the one who sat with me through nights when my heart refused to settle, when my breathing turned shallow, when I thought I would close my eyes for the last time. Not Linda, not Haley, not any of you who call yourselves family. It was Emily who stayed. His voice cracked slightly, but his anger only burned brighter, his hands trembling with force as he pointed directly at my mother. You think you have the right to say she doesn't belong at this table? Let me make something clear. Without her, this table wouldn't even exist, because she's the only one who cared enough to be here when it mattered. I watched from the window, my chest tightening, tears streaming unchecked as his words fell like hammer blows, each one shattering the false pride and poisoned laughter that had filled that room only minutes before. My mother tried to speak, stuttering, "Dad, you don't understand." But he cut her off, slamming his cane again, eyes blazing. "I understand more than you think. I've seen your cruelty, Linda, the way you and Haley whisper behind her back, the way you've made her feel small every chance you get. And I stayed quiet longer than I should have. But tonight, I will not stay quiet. You've made her an outsider in her own family, and I will not forgive it." The room sat frozen, no one daring to meet his eyes, and then his next words dropped like a thunderclap. "Since you seem so certain, Emily doesn't belong. Let me tell you where she does belong. She belongs to me. She is my heir. Everything I've worked for, every piece of this family's wealth, every business share, every property, it all goes to her. Not to you, not to Haley, not to anyone else sitting here who thought mocking her made you superior. She is the one I trust to carry my legacy." Gasps filled the room. Haley's glass slipped from her hand and shattered across the floor. My father's face drained of color, and my mother's lips parted in disbelief as though the ground had been ripped from beneath her. The cousins looked at each other in panic, realizing the balance of power had shifted in an instant, and the same people who had laughed when I left the table now sat pale and trembling, stripped of their arrogance. "If she doesn't sit at this table, then none of you deserve to sit here either," Grandpa continued, his voice low but dangerous, each word deliberate. "Emily will choose who stays in this family and who doesn't, because I've seen your true faces tonight, and you should all be ashamed." He turned sharply, his cane tapping against the floor as he walked away, and the sound of his footsteps echoed louder than the silence left behind. When the door opened again, and he stepped back onto the porch, alone, his expression was hard, but his eyes softened when they landed on me. "It's done," he said simply, his hand brushing my shoulder in a rare show of tenderness. "Let them sit in their own shame." I swallowed, unable to find words, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Inside, the family that had once laughed at me now sat in stunned silence, their faces drained of smugness, their pride shattered, each of them realizing they had underestimated me. And worse, underestimated the man who had just placed everything in my hands. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the girl they whispered about behind my back, the outsider sitting quietly at the corner of the table. I was the one they feared, the one they'd have to answer to. And the satisfaction that rolled through me as I heard the faint murmur of panic rising from behind the closed doors was unlike anything I had ever felt before. The moment my grandfather's words sank in, the atmosphere inside that dining room fractured into chaos cloaked in silence, the kind of silence where everyone's mind screamed louder than their voices dared to. I could see through the window, the way Haley's face turned red with fury, her fists tightening around her napkin until it shredded, my mother frozen like she'd just been struck, my father staring blankly at the table as though the wood grain might swallow him whole, and my cousins exchanging nervous glances like they were suddenly calculating which side of this war they should stand on. Grandpa had declared me heir, the one they all thought didn't belong, the girl they had mocked, dismissed, and belittled at every chance. And now the ground beneath their perfect little hierarchy had crumbled, and I knew their smiles would turn to knives the moment they thought they could use them. I slipped further into the shadows of the porch as the whispers finally erupted. Haley's voice cut through, shrill and venomous. This is ridiculous. She's done nothing. She doesn't deserve it. I'm the one who's been here. I'm the one who's earned it. My mother, her pride wounded, added, Dad, you can't just hand everything over to her because of some pity. She's weak. She's irresponsible. But Grandpa's cane slammed down again, silencing them even from where I stood outside. You will not speak about her that way again, he thundered, and the force in his voice made the chandelier above tremble slightly. You speak of what she deserves? She deserves everything because she showed loyalty when none of you did. She stood beside me when I had nothing to offer her but fading breaths, while you were too busy drinking champagne and attending parties. Haley shoved her chair back violently, the leg scraping so hard it screeched, her eyes wild with desperation. This isn't fair. She's stealing what's mine. And for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her face. Not superiority, fear that everything she had built her shallow pride on was slipping away in seconds. My father finally spoke, his voice low but bitter. Emily doesn't know the first thing about responsibility. She'll ruin everything. And Grandpa's gaze hardened as he looked at him. Maybe she will stumble, but she will not ruin this family the way your silence has. You were supposed to protect her, and you failed. You all failed. The shame in his tone cut sharper than any knife, and I felt tears well in my eyes again. Not from sadness this time, but from a vindication I had never thought I would taste. The room shifted into arguments, whispers, the clink of trembling silverware, but beneath it all was the undeniable truth. The power had moved into my hands, and they knew it. That's when the begging started. My aunt leaned forward, her tone sweet but desperate. Emily's young, Henry. She doesn't understand how ruthless the world can be. Maybe we can guide her. Maybe Haley can help her. They can share the responsibility. But Grandpa cut her off coldly. You mean steal it from her the way you've stolen her dignity? No. This family will answer to Emily now. The panic that followed was palpable, the greedy shine in their eyes replaced with desperation, like people trapped in a burning building, realizing the only exit door was in my hands. My mother finally stood, trying to gather some control, smoothing her dress and forcing her voice calm. Fine, she said tightly. If this is the decision, then we'll just have to accept it. But Emily should be reminded of what we've done for her, the roof we gave her, the years we raised her. Her words were a knife disguised as honey, and I could almost laugh at the hypocrisy. Grandpa leaned on his cane, his voice steady but merciless. What you gave her was not love. It was duty twisted into cruelty, and I will not let you use it against her now. My mother's face fell, the color draining, and Haley burst into tears. The kind of theatrical crying that once fooled everyone in the room, but now only filled the space with discomfort. Through the glass, I could see cousins whispering to each other, some already glancing toward the door as if they wanted to escape the storm that had broken the family apart. And me? I stood frozen on the porch, my breath coming fast, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest, realizing for the first time that I wasn't powerless anymore, realizing that the people who had treated me like a shadow were now watching the light swing directly onto me. And yet, in that moment of twisted triumph, I understood something deeper. This wasn't just about inheritance, property, or wealth. It was about identity, belonging, dignity, everything they had tried to strip from me. And now, with my grandfather's declaration echoing in the air, they had no choice but to see me, to fear me, and to prepare for a future where the girl they shoved to the edge of the table was the only one with a seat that mattered. My hands trembled as I stood on that porch, the night air cool against my skin, but something inside me had shifted. Something that had been buried for years under the weight of my family's cruelty was finally clawing its way to the surface, and when I heard my mother's strained voice and Haley's broken sobs leaking through the door, I realized it was time to stop hiding. I pushed the door open slowly, and the sound of it creaking silenced the room faster than any shout could have, every head snapping toward me as if I were no longer the invisible daughter they dismissed, but a figure they could no longer ignore. My mother's lips parted, her face a blend of fear and anger, but no words came out, and Haley's tear-streaked cheeks burned as she glared at me like I was the villain who had stolen her crown. My father shifted in his seat, avoiding my eyes, while my cousins stared wide-eyed as if they were witnessing something they had never thought possible. Grandpa didn't turn to look at me. He didn't need to. His presence behind me was enough. His declaration still vibrating in the air like thunder, and I felt it steady me, push me forward. I walked slowly, each step echoing in the silence, and when I reached the table, I didn't sit in the empty chair I had left earlier. I stood tall at the head beside my grandfather, my voice calm, but cutting. "You wanted me gone," I said, my eyes sweeping across them. "And for years you've succeeded in making me feel like an outsider, like I didn't matter, like my silence was proof you could walk all over me. But look at you now. Look at the faces you wear when you realize I'm the one holding the power you thought was yours." My mother clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms, and whispered harshly, "You're just a child compared. To us, you don't know how this family works." But her voice cracked under the weight of her fear, and I leaned forward slightly, meeting her gaze with a strength I didn't know I had. "No, Mom," I said firmly. "I know exactly how this family works. It feeds on humiliation. It feeds on tearing down the ones who don't play by your rules. And you've mistaken my silence for weakness. That ends tonight." Haley slammed, her hand on the table, her tears morphing into rage. "You can't do this. Everything was supposed to be mine. You've always been nothing," she screamed, and for a moment, I almost pitied her. But then I remembered every sneer, every cruel laugh, every whispered word meant to cut me down, and the pity dissolved into steel. "Maybe I was nothing to you," I said, my voice sharp. "But that's because you needed me to be nothing so you could feel like everything. But that illusion is over, Haley. You don't get to define me anymore." The room buzzed with tension, my cousins fidgeting nervously, my aunt and uncle staring down at their plates like the truth burned too hot to look at directly, and my father's jaw tightened as though he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. My grandfather finally tapped his cane once, his voice low and final. "You've heard her. This is no longer a debate." And with that, the air shifted permanently. The family that once laughed at me now sat in silence, crushed under the weight of what they had lost, while I stood taller than I ever had before, no longer the girl who had been told she didn't belong at the table, but the woman who had become the table itself, the foundation they would have to bow to if they wanted a seat in the future.